Here to respond to my angle, Candace Owens, Communications Director for Turning Points USA, Monica Crowley, Senior Columnist with the Washington Times, and Democratic strategist Rochelle Ritchie. All right, Candace, are these political swipes and kind of reworked, old stories, are they really worth half of the reported $65 million advance that Michelle Obama was paid for her memoir by Crown Publishing?
I think to the Democrat Party, they're definitely worth it. I mean, these are the same tired and baseless accusations that everybody says when they want to sell books. We saw this from Michael Wolff. We saw this from Omarosa. They're constantly using the president and trying to feed the divisive rhetoric that's already out there in the media. But I take great exception to the idea that our president, this tired and baseless accusation that he's a misogynist. Misogyny does not appoint Sarah Sanders. Misogyny does not appoint Kellyanne Conway. Misogyny does not appoint everybody on his staff that we are seeing that is being led by women. So it's really ridiculous and it's tired, but it's really unbecoming, especially coming from the former administration, to constantly verbally assault this president.
Rochelle, it's interesting coming from someone who's such a global celebrity as Michelle Obama to hear her sound, I would say, rather ordinary in her criticism of the president. I mean, what she said about the president, without necessarily mentioning his name, was what you'd hear on one of the other cable networks any morning, noon, and night. You could pick that line out of the commentary that you hear from all the Trump haters on the other cables. So how does that really distinguish Michelle Obama from any garden variety leftist?
Well, look, Laura, I think it's no surprise that I'm probably the only person on this panel right now who's really excited to actually read Michelle Obama's book. I think she's an exceptional woman. I think that she serves as a great example to women all across the world that our ticket to success is our brains and not our body. And I think that she's simply telling her truth. I mean, the xenophobic accusations that were hurled at her husband were definitely offensive. And as she mentioned in her book, it put her family at risk. And I think she's just being very candid and very honest. I mean, this is one portion of the book where she's talking about Trump. It's not entirely about Trump. So I don't see really the problem with her writing this book. And I think that many more First Ladies, I'm sure First Lady Melania Trump will come out with a book and she will share her personal feelings of what it was like to be in a Trump White House. So I'm not really sure why there's so much anger and hatred as far as Michelle Obama coming out and sharing her truth.
It's not anger, certainly not hatred. We have nothing personally against the First Lady, and I think she's extremely impressive as an individual, as a mother, as a spokesperson for what she believes in. So I think she's very impressive. We're talking about something that they decided to sell this book with. Trump trashing is a cash-in scenario, Monica. When you trash Trump, and you could say the same thing about people criticizing Obama early on in the Obama presidency, come on, be fair here. But you trash Trump, you can get a big advance. But why is that interesting? That's my point. It's interesting to hear about, I guess, her growing up and I guess maybe how she met Barack, although we've kind of heard those stories before. But just Trump's a racist, Trump's a misogynist, Trump's a misogynist, Trump's a... Okay. I mean, we've been hearing that now for years.
Right. And it's boring and predictable. And that's why it's so disappointing to hear it from the former First Lady. I mean, there used to be a rule, Laura, that if you had nothing nice to say about someone, don't say anything at all. And that rule was also supposed to really extend to former presidents, their wives, and others in a president's inner circle. And Mr. Obama's predecessors have abided by that rule, but neither the former president nor the First Lady have. And I wonder if she has some political ambitions of her own, which is why she thinks she can stake out this ground in attacking the president. But I also think that both of them were so concerned when President Trump was elected that their entire legacy was about to go out the window. We were told for 8 years by the Obamas and everyone in their administration that the new normal was high unemployment and the loss of manufacturing jobs and anemic economic growth and American decline and the globalist march. All of these things were inevitable. President Trump has put the lie to all of that. And so I think what you're seeing is enormous frustration and lashing out on the part of Mrs. Obama and, frankly, everybody in the Obama administration.
All right. I want to play for you something from Zerlina Maxwell. I'll go to Candace on this. And she was on MSNBC today on this very subject. Let's watch.
I agree with her. The fact that we elected someone who had no qualifications to be president, who was running against a woman with a laundry list of qualifications to be president, and instead America or the Electoral chose to give the Electoral College to the person with no experience who happened to be a man, just like all of the other presidents. And so what Michelle Obama is highlighting is the fact that that in and of itself is misogynistic and sexist, and perhaps as a country we should take a moment to reflect on that.
Again, women who voted for Trump are either dumb or they're just following their husbands. And we're not going to offer any ideas, Candace, about how to raise the standard of living for the average American. We're just going to call people misogynist, racist, xenophobic, nativist, all the ists and all the isms. They're all worn out. Forget the actual debating of ideas.
That's exactly correct. And look, you're right. It is frustration. It is fatigue. You know, they're not offering anything of substance. There's no ideological debate taking place. It has been proven now. Okay, if you were apprehensive in the beginning about Trump and his lack of experience in the realm of politics, but it's now proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that this president has been tremendously successful. So at this point, it feels a bit like whining. And I think just as Americans, we're ready to move on from this concept of everybody has to be an ism if they don't think like me. You don't elect somebody because they're a woman. You elect somebody because they're the best person suited for the job. And up against Hillary Clinton, President Trump was a much stronger candidate. He ran a better campaign, and that's why he's sitting in the Oval Office today.
Hey, Rochelle, do you think that the press has treated Melania in the same way that they treated Michelle?
Well, look, no, I don't think they have. And I can be honest about that. I mean, when we look at how Michelle Obama was treated, she was treated in a very different way. But I think that's because her husband was also not pushing forward a very divisive rhetoric in the press, and her husband was not attacking the press. So, and this is something, you know, Melania is not innocent in this at all either when it comes to this whole birther issue, which she also peddled for her husband. So, yeah, no, they haven't treated her fairly. But at the same time, I think that they're looking at the sort of administration, the sort of rhetoric that is coming from her husband, and is not attractive to them.
Are you aware of the polls at the end of the Obama administration about whether the country felt like his 8 years in office had united the country? Are you aware of those, Rochelle?
Well, what I'm aware of is that 77% of this country right now, in the polls that came out just before the midterm elections, says that the country feels that they're more divisive. I am aware of that poll.
I understand that. But what I'm trying to say, and Monica, I'm sure you're aware of this, that there was a wild percentage of Americans who believe that the Obama presidency was not a uniting force in America. Despite all the promise and the historic nature of his presidency, people felt like the country was more divided and less united and angrier. And this is not like a Daily Caller poll, okay? I think it was AP or Washington Post. Forgive me for not having it off the top of my head. I did it today on radio. But Monica, so the idea that Trump is the great divisive factor in America, it's not how a lot of people felt at the end of 8 years of Obama, which is why, in part, they elected Trump.
Well, that's exactly right. And what we saw over 8 years with President Obama is that while he was personally popular, people appreciated the fact that he was an exceptional character, the first African-American president. They were proud of that fact. His policies were wholly unpopular. And in some ways, that's the mirror image of Donald Trump, where personally he's not so popular, but his policies are incredibly popular. So, you know, and getting back to the Melania issue, any Republican first lady is going to be treated like this, Laura. It's just, you know, a fact of the double standard life in America, unfortunately, and it's really unfair to her. But I think Americans, by and large, are sick of the double standard, and that's why you have continuing support for President Trump, because he's trying to smash it.
Well, it's apparent, and Candace, we're almost out of time. But look, I mean, the Bushes did not criticize the Obamas. They didn't.
That's correct.
I mean,
and that's
at
what's
all.
traditional.
Why would they? Why would they? I'm sorry, I know you're talking to Candace.
Because they doubled the debt, because
it's respectful.
Because we had Benghazi, because Obamacare was a cram down. Let me count the ways.
But they also didn't question whether or not Obama was born in this country. Like, I don't even understand how you can make.
These are cheap shots.
I don't even understand how you can make that connection at all.
I'm going to finish my. It's them trying to resuscitate their relevancy because, unfortunately,
they'll always be relevant.
This president has laid slaughter to the Obama legacy, and that's what's going on.
No, not at all.
All right, guys, thanks so much.